Hello and welcome back to the Now We Know Show, the show where we discuss a topic of interest, and by the end we will have learned something new, and hopefully you will too. I'm Zach.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Buzz.
In today's episode we will kick off, as always, with Word of the Week, followed by the Now We Know Show flashback. We will then begin with our main segment, all about filmmaking on a budget, and finally round up with the answer to Word of the Week at the end of the episode.
Huzzah!
If you enjoy the Now We Know Show podcast, why not support Zak Wylde Productions on our Patreon page? Become an official ZWP Patron for as little as £1 a month for exclusive early access to all our latest episodes, videos, behind the scenes, updates and more. So, that brings us on to Word of the Week. Word of the Week. Word of the Week. Come on, Jack.
Word of the Week.
Word of the Week. Word of the Week. Word of the Week.
Word of the Week.
Word of the Week.
You get the hang of it.
It's only my second time doing the Word of the Week.
So, Word of the Week is all about old English words we don't use anymore. All you have to do is write down what you think it means in the comments. We will then reveal what it means at the end of the episode so you can find out if you got it right.
Okay.
So,
What is Word of the Week?
the Word of the Week this week is fudgel.
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 Spelt F-U-D-G-E-L. Fudgel.
Fudgel. Like cudgel, but a fudgel.
Fudgel.
I don't know where you would have.
Got a nasty fudgel.
So-
you hit people on the head with a cudgel, and you don't want to know where you stick your fudgel.
That gives you something to think about during this episode so we can find out at the end.
That's what you get if you eat too much fudge.
Fudgel.
So that brings us on to the Now We Know Show flashback.
Ooh, one of my favourite
I
segments.
like your little jingle.
Little jingle sound there. Okay, so I want you to cast your minds back
Okay, I'm casting.
to our geocaching episodes.
Okay, which particular one?
Or just any of the geocaching episodes. First of all, if you haven't listened to any of the geocaching episodes we've done on the Now We Know Show podcast, go check it out.
Right, I'm casting my mind. Have you cast your mind back, Jack?
Quite fun. It's a
Flashback.
little
Flashback noise.
little adventure. But what we've done now is we've actually started to do a series of videos called The Fellowship of the Caches,
Oh, yes.
which combines our love of geocaching and Lord of the Rings.
Huzzah!
So if you haven't looked at
We're
that
going
yet,
on an adventure.
very good. So the first video of The Fellowship of the Caches is available on the Zak Wylde Productions YouTube channel. It's called An Adventure in Fangorn Forest. So go check that out if you're interested. Now on to the main segment.
Yay!
Hey.
And the main segment is over to Jack.
Well, today I thought it'd be a good idea, as we've recently actually shot a short film. We're going to talk about the sort of process of making a micro-budget film.
Yes.
So I'm quite passionate about filmmaking. That's something I want to pursue in my career. And everyone in this episode, in this booth,
In the
currently
booth.
in the booth,
In the dungeon.
In the dungeon.
in the dungeon booth, has some experience.
Yeah.
With
A history with filmmaking.
yes, we're all very closely
Associated.
with filmmaking.
I was being fitted a studio only today.
Exactly.
I was filming last week at a cathedral.
There we go. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about the process of making a micro-budget film, or a low-budget film, but we'll get onto kind of
Yeah,
the
there you
titles as well, because it can be quite a daunting process, especially if you've never made a film before. Where do you start? What tips do we have, having sort of made
Mhm.
previous films? What things do you need to avoid? What things do you need to remember? So I thought I'd
Discuss
open
this.
up the discussion, and
Open up the discussion.
if anyone's listening that's kind of wanting to get
so
into
anybody
filmmaking,
who's
then
decided, hey, I've got an idea for a film,
yes.
and let's going to make it. How do we go about it?
Yes.
That's the basic.
Well, I believe like the first step on that process is you've got to want to make something,
Yes.
and you've got to have a concept to put into action to begin with.
Yes, it all starts with an idea,
Yeah,
ideally. If you don't have an idea, then you're kind of
stuck.
flying without wings a little bit, and you're kind of just filming anything. So the first thing I would say is come up with a solid idea, or at least come up with something that you want to tell, or a story that you want to tell, or if you have something you're passionate about, try and incorporate that into the idea.
So I went to university to study film and TV production, and
Yes.
you, Jack, went to college to
Yes.
study. What was the course?
Film and media
Well, they are.
studies.
But a thing they stipulated in this beginning part of this process is you've got to come up with a 20-second elevator pitch.
Mm.
And you've got to be able to convey that to, say you come across a high executive movie producer in an elevator, for instance. You've got to be able to present your idea
quickly
and concisely.
And efficiently, yes.
A good way, they said, to start is by associating it to another successful film.
Mm.
So, like, it's Jaws, but in space, or something like that.
Yes, yeah. Get the familiarity of an existing film, so people have that in their mind when they're thinking about whatever film you're about to make, and go from there.
So you don't say it's Jaws 4 in space.
The Quest for Peace. No, that's Superman.
Actually going right the wrong way. Jaws 4? No!
So in terms of the actual process of making a short film, obviously you've got your idea. Ideally, it can be anything you want, as long as it's kind of an idea that's sort of practical, that you can make. If you're setting a film in space or on a different planet, obviously it can be difficult.
Yeah, we'll go in depth a bit later on, I think, in that, because that gets into set design, etc.
Yes, yeah. So ideally, if you want to make something on a very small budget, keep your idea practical and
simple,
achievable. Is probably the better
that's
word.
That's a good way of putting it.
Well, you say if you have an idea for a film, but not everybody who has an idea for a film wants to be the person who shoots the film.
Exactly.
Because they might have no camera knowledge, or they might actually themselves have no interest
or
in
equipment.
Yeah.
Well,
so you might be somebody I've got this great idea for a film, but I need somebody to film it.
I think we're very lucky in the time that we're in that everyone has a phone with a camera on, and a pretty good camera. So in terms of equipment, you don't necessarily, in this day and age, need the highest tech equipment to make a short film. You've got a decent camera on your phone. Everyone's usually got a laptop where they can find free editing software, or you can even edit on your phone now with sort of various apps and things. So we're in a time where you have the technology to make a film and also distribute a film.
Yeah, I will concur. There's never been a better time or an easier time to make a movie.
A cheaper time as well.
Or a cheaper time, because when I was a kid, myself and my friends, we all went 1977. Star Wars comes out, and we were like, "Wow, this is fantastic!" Yeah, we really liked it. And I remember throwing my mind back to then. I remember having a discussion with my friends saying how great it would be to film our own sequel to it, because at the time you didn't know if it was even going to get a sequel. It was just a one-off movie, and we were looking at buying a cine camera, and then we were trying to work out, okay, you're going to get a cine camera, and that's celluloid film, so you got to film it, and you get one crack at the shot you take, because the only way you're going to edit it together is to literally physically cut the film and splice it together.
Physical process of editing,
and
isn't it?
Our ideas at the time, back in 1977, for our space age kit was spray some water pistols, a different colour, and put plastic bin bags on for costumes. It was a great discussion from very enthusiastic young kids,
it's when your imagination kind of set sail and just go with it.
The reason I mention that is because at the time you're just saying, okay, what have we got to what have we got that we can use to do what we want to make? And that was a cine camera and some very basic editing equipment, a projector, and when you've got zero budget, what can you get out of the stuff around you? But nowadays, as you just said, Jack, everybody has got literally a cine camera in their pocket and editing equipment, which is, just beyond imagination for back in 1977, that you can get off the internet for free, and of course desktop computers, laptops, etc. you can use for that editing.
Even
it's amazing how accessible it is compared to that rudimentary.
Even like you say, you need a projector to project your film. If you're lucky, you get a bunch of people to see it. But nowadays with the internet, YouTube, Dailymotion, anything like this, you can stick your film up on it, and within hours, 1,000 people could have seen your film.
If you could imagine, if we had been able to make our very ropey Star Wars follow-up short film in our bin bags, nobody would have seen that up until all these years later, I could now, if I could put it onto YouTube tomorrow. Obviously, we never made it, but I
Mm.
could do, and I bet you it would get. Loads of people see these kids in 1977 running around.
Now, I suppose now you're kind of like you've got an inexhaustible amount of all these different bits of software, distribution, and everything.
Mm.
Could that be conceived as being a particularly daunting
Yeah, I was
prospect
that
if
was-
you're not technically minded?
That was the next thing I was going to say, because there are a lot of people that might have an idea, but then they are put off because it sounds, for us, it sounds a more easy thing to do.
Mm.
Yeah.
But other people, it's like, oh, you want me to go on a computer? You want me to learn some? Because just the editing software, that's a learning curve in its own.
Yeah,
It's like-
each one's different.
It's like asking someone to write sheet music, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like, if you've never written music before, then how do you compose a song? It's the same thing with filmmaking. If you've never made a film before, it's like it can be quite a daunting process, especially, as you say, when you see all the things that go into making a film, the amount of people it takes as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably thinking, like, how do I get this amount of people to help me make a film?
Well, I think that's when you've got to really cut you've got to look at it really from. You mentioned about a micro budget movie or a low budget movie. A lot of people will associate the term low budget movie with a movie being of poor quality, which is a shame that they do that, because low budget is just, that means it's only got an X amount of budget to spend on. It doesn't mean that the movie's poor because it's a low budget movie. So what are we talking about? Basically, a basic micro budget movie is anything that you would spend from £0 to £10,000 on.
Yeah.
And a low budget movie up to no more than about £300,000.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
That's a low budget. After that, then you're in full
Industrial level.
industrial movie making. So we got to pull in the reins a bit and say, okay, we're going micro budget here. That's what we're discussing. So, even £10,000 is a lot of money.
Mm.
And
If utilised effectively,
Yeah,
it can go a long way.
But you can, depending on the subject material, bring a micro budget movie together for literally next to nothing. If you can beg, borrow and steal the equipment from people's good intentions to help you out, both from the acting perspective to the filming perspective and the sound and the editing and everything else.
Every aspect.
Every aspect. If you can pull that together, you don't. It's a daunting task if you're going to do it all by yourself.
Definitely.
Yes, almost impossible, I would say. If you're going literally on your own, it's going to be very, very difficult to make anything unless it's very well planned out.
However, I will say, worked in the film industry for many, many years, you do get an issue with people wanting to make movies, and then they'll approach actors to say, "Oh, I've got an opportunity if you want to help out on this movie. It'll be great coverage for you,
Great for your show reels.
show
they could want.
reel," and they'll sell it like that. Actors have to pay their bills. They don't want to be working for free.
It is their job.
Exactly, it's their job. And so what I want to start off saying is, we're not talking about taking the mickey and trying to get people to work for free.
Yeah, don't extort people.
You might be able to afford a little fee. Otherwise, there are plenty of budding actors out there, and drama actors, people that are enthusiastic maybe because they're a fan of a genre, that are more than happy to throw their hat in and give it a go for absolutely nothing, just because of the sheer enjoyment of being involved with the movie process.
Yeah, would you say that when it comes to that, the actors would probably be more inclined to kind of seek you out as opposed to the other way around? Does that kind of translate?
It depends on your reputation, how sort of well known you are as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got to assemble your crew, but if you're going to do it on a micro budget, you as an individual with your idea is probably going to end up having to be both the producer and the director and do a lot.
Yeah,
of
those
other
kind
jobs.
of like industry roles kind of merge into kind of like, I don't know, the way you have it in your mind.
I mean, yeah, if you looked at a credit reel at the end of any film, you have a dizzying array of names for jobs within just producing one.
Yeah, those
film.
kind of jobs on a micro budget film level kind of merge and almost overlap.
You need to take on multiple roles if you want to.
Yeah.
So you're basically, every film's got a producer, and the producer is the one that makes the movie happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
They're the organiser.
Yeah, they're organising things, and they're also sorting out the finance for it. Your director, that's the one with the creative input that wants to
shape
the movie.
The director can change as well midway through
or you can have more than one director.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interchangeable thing.
You've got your camera crew, obviously. So
Yep.
you've got somebody who is operating the camera. You might have a sound operator separate from that, or you might have one. We're talking micro budget, so you might have one person doing just one job, or hopefully you've got
Industry level, you have entire departments dedicated to each.
departments. You've obviously got your set, which you've got to find. I mean, doing a micro budget one, a lot of the time they say if you're going to film just in one location.
Yeah.
Film in one location, and things like use natural light because of the expense of going to studio lighting and things.
Lighting is a whole new thing. Like, people study lighting in film.
Yeah.
It's if you can use natural light, then do. But I would encourage people to experiment with light because it can be a useful tool. But
I find that one of the
difficult.
most useful little things that you can pick up, even if you're just using natural light, is a reflector board. You can get these pop-up reflector boards.
Yeah.
And which can reflect light or shadow it if something's too bright. Very cheap. Even if you've got no additional lighting, something like that is a very handy.
Can be used effectively.
Yeah, because if you've got two actors and they're holding a conversation, you might need to get some extra light to light up one side of their face or something.
Yeah.
So where you can look at those aspects. So you've got the lighting, you've got the set, as I say, you've got costumes as well, hair and makeup. Also, don't forget catering, because even if people are helping you off they're doing it for the goodness of their heart, helping you because they're enthusiastic about producing this film that you're doing. Make sure you at least supply them with hot drinks, cold drinks, and nibbles.
Yeah, limited facilities at
If
least.
you've got a limited budget, you can at least try your best to keep people happy.
Yeah. We should really add as an asterisk as well. We're talking very much about live action films, where a lot of my love for film or filmmaking came from was stop motion animation. I did a lot when I was a kid. I would just
back in the day.
I would just find Doctor Who figures mostly because they were the most sort of realistic I could find, and I would just take still images or take a video and then take still images from there and just make my own little stories. They'd never be seen by anyone. They would just go on a disc and I'd show my parents and that was it. Like, they'd never go anywhere. But that's something you can do on your own if you're happy to do, or if you have a knowledge of doing stop motion. I'd say that's an option where you don't necessarily need anyone else really, other than just your photos and possibly.
I also believe there is software around now that you can do animation as well.
Yeah, you probably find stop
widely
motion
available
apps on your phone now, which I would have loved as a kid, but I had to use a DSLR and also I'd go through all sorts of processes to get my films out. But
some very experimental and
improvisational. And you can download, high tech animation software now, where you can make animation shorts on your own. I should just caveat that we should mention animation because it is a big part of filmmaking, and I don't necessarily have too much experience with it, but I'm sure someone's probably thinking we should talk about animation.
Well, there you are.
Animation as a genre of film, definitely, but you also kind of had animation spills over into the live action if you're going to put special effects on it. If you have video effects, VFX, because you might have to animate some of the stuff.
A crazy example of that now would probably be Avatar, because that's kind of mostly the CGI, but it's kind of that motion capture element. Yeah, and you've only got limited live action in there.
I would say if you're looking to make a micro budget film, don't aim
don't
for Avatar.
Don't go for jump from micro budget.
That is true. That is
one
true.
of the biggest
very true.
productions on the planet.
Let's just rein it back a little bit.
Okay.
We're going to have all our listeners go straight out there and making their own Avatar movie.
Should we talk a little bit about video nasties, just briefly? Because they're the sort of films I look at as successful low-budget films, or at least a genre of low-budget films. That
video nasties was a term that came out early 80s, from what I remember, because we got anybody off the top of your head remember when The Evil Dead came out?
1981.
Okay, so
I believe
films like I think Bad Taste might have been another one, but things like the
Deadly Spawn,
Shogun
Assassin.
In fact, Deadly Spawn was the first video nasty that I took home to show my parents. It was like, I brought home video home.
I mean, even like Texas Chainsaw to a certain extent.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Massacre, yeah. So they were video nasties, but it was a term that's when that came out, because suddenly it's funny because you've already mentioned now you can just punch YouTube up, you can watch all these videos, but back then, prior to that, you went to the cinema to watch a movie, and you usually had to wait around 4 years before a mainstream movie would then get bought by a television company to show as their special movies at Christmas. Yeah, and then eventually they'd sort of water down. You might see it every so often through the year, but to see a movie, you needed to go to the cinema. Of course, when video comes along, suddenly that's when you get access to people making their own movies, and then they can bypass the cinema, put them straight out on a video cassette that anybody can get. And of course, when they started to be distributed through video stores, it wasn't long before censorship people, just mums and dads would suddenly see something that the kids brought home and go, my God, what is this? And then the term video nasty came out, and that's what banned a lot of them.
Yeah.
I think there is actually a definitive list of video nasties. I think there's about 80 of them.
But to say that, I don't think anything is a video nasty these days.
No.
There is nothing that happened then, but you don't have films being banned now.
The reason I bring it up is because whenever I think of, in brackets or in quotations, low budget film, I always think of Evil Dead, because it is something that's kind of inspired me in my filmmaking nowadays. And it's because it is known for being a film that used that had a low budget and utilized practical effects and animation. Yeah, and obviously Sam Raimi just used all of his mates
stop
as well.
Motion shows. Stop motion now. Because they had a lot of kind of. I'm sure some of the creature effects in that were like plasticine that were.
Kind of dissolving into the ground.
It's a good example of what we're talking about, because Sam Raimi just used all of his mates who weren't necessarily actors or actresses, and he just used them in his film and just said, "This is what you need to do." He even put, I think, like really thick contact lenses in one of the actress's eyes at one point, and it gave her like probably damaged her retinas or something. And it's like, he obviously wasn't qualified to do it, but he just did it because it was.
We're not advising anybody
out.
goes
Didn't they use a real gun to shoot through a window at one point? I think they did.
Well, that wouldn't be let's be honest.
Because it's
America, and that wouldn't have been a.
Yeah, they didn't have access to a fake one, so they used a real.
It wouldn't have been a fuss. You would have just said, "Okay, guys, stand back, pop." And
even now, that film has such a big following, and
definitely.
It's
just think of where it ran to. You know, it had its sequels and it's had its TV series, and it's just become synonymous now with.
Yeah.
And in fact, they've just brought a new one out, haven't they? The Evil Dead Rise.
The new one's coming out soon. So let's rein it back a little bit. Okay. Talk about the pre-production of a short film and where you're up to with the process of making film. So you've got your idea.
Yep, got your idea.
I would suggest at this point, either if you have dialogue, write a script. You don't necessarily have to write the whole thing. You can write bits at a time. If you come up with an idea for a scene, just write the scene. Don't necessarily need.
If you have the idea, write it down. It can always be adjusted.
I'd recommend that actually, because sometimes I have an idea and I start at the beginning, and then by the time I've got to the bit I had the idea for, I've kind of messed it or I've lost it. Right. So I would suggest that. If you're not a writer, I would say possibly sketch. If you want to do storyboards, sketch your idea out.
Storyboards are an interesting thing, because that puts a lot of people off, because not everybody's an artist.
You don't need to
be an artist.
I know, but even doing, there are certain things that if you can just Google it on the internet, but there's certain things which you can use in different coloured lines, like a blue line to a small square in one of your storyboard squares will indicate the camera moving in on a subject or moving out on a subject. There's certain things like that, and you can draw stick men. But it's still, people can be a little bit put off that they've got to do all the drawings. And I was just going to say there is another way you can do it. If you've got, don't have to be the actors, but if you can use yourself and friends that you know, but you can actually storyboard using photos. Yeah, if you don't want to do the artwork, you can actually just literally do it. Getting them
with the technology we have now.
So I was going to throw that in there, because storyboards can seem a bit daunting to some people, but if you want to do the storyboard, you can do it photo-wise. Yeah.
And alternatively to that, you can also just do a basic shot list and literally just write the things you want to do.
Oh yeah, you can do it on that. I think people like kind of visual, something visual to look at.
I think
especially when you're talking to somebody else or presenting this idea to. I think
it all depends. You can do all of them as well. It's not necessarily you need to do one of them. You can storyboard and then go out and take photos.
Yeah, it's all recommendations.
Write your shot list, and then go out and take photos or sketch, whatever you want to do really. As long as you've kind of got the basic outline in your head when you go to film, the more planning the better. Prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
That's when you go. The next stage would be blocking the scenes, wouldn't it? So you've got your storyboard, and then you might take each individual scene and then act that scene out
Yes.
in order to see how it works and see what camera angles work best for that. And again, you don't do it with the actors.
Stand-ins.
One that you can go and look at, if you go look at the Lord of the Rings, and then you look at behind the scenes with Peter Jackson, you'll just see him
Yeah.
and some of the other crew members going through all the scenes.
Mm.
You know, and it's great. It's great to watch. It literally makes the whole movie by blocking through it.
It's known as a previs or
Yeah.
a pre-visualization, where you can just make the film on just with nothing.
And don't worry about the exact set or costumes or anything. You're literally looking at it for how you're shooting it.
Yeah, it's something you can utilize to show the people you're working with, to kind of help them understand your vision.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've had this before on set where we've been taken off and shown a monitor where they've done like a little bit like that, and they say, well, this is what we're trying to achieve in this scene.
Yeah.
And you go, right, okay, yeah, I can understand where you're coming from now.
Yeah.
And then you can go back and you can then perform that scene, understanding that what you're doing is now, you know what's in the director's head. Yeah.
So this is like the basic pre-production process. There's obviously so much more you need to put into it before you actually start rolling on your film. You need to make sure you've got the actors in. If you need more than one actor, you need a certain amount of people.
With the talent,
You can also
call it the talent, don't we? It's the talent, getting the talent in. You got talent and you got background as well. But if you don't have to have a huge cast.
No.
Yeah, because you might want to just say, well, okay, I'm going to rein it in, and just my story is going to revolve just around 2 people.
Yeah, especially on a micro budget.
Yeah.
The less people you have to organise,
with.
the easier it's going to be for you.
Yeah,
Yes.
which also helps in this one factor that's probably jumping in there early on this one, but that's continuity. The continuity is a key factor, I find, in when you're making a micro budget movie, because if you're doing a micro budget movie, most of the time you do not have the time to take a block of time. Yeah, so unless you're going to shoot a movie literally over a week, 1 weekend, 2 days, if this movie you've planned out is going to take you in total 10 days worth of filming, you'll find that a lot of people that make micro budget movies haven't got 10 days in one block. They can't ask their friends and those people involved in it to do, can you all take 10 days off work?
Especially if you're relying on their goodwill.
Exactly. And so therefore you're working around people's work schedules and normal life. So when you're doing a micro budget movie, you've got to film that in these little spare segments of time when people are available, and continuity can go out the window, because again, a film can be filmed, but it could take several months, if not more than a year, to get it filmed in completion. So and people can change. Somebody who has a beard doesn't have a beard. things can happen. So you've got to keep an eye on, when you're doing that storyline, your timeline as how long it's going to take you to film this, and make sure that you can keep control of the continuity.
Yeah. So, for instance, a good thing with that would be, if you're going to record a scene, record the one scene on one weekend, and when you come back to it a few weeks down the line, record another scene. So don't go back to previous scenes that you've already pre-recorded and say it's a month or so later and somebody's not got a beard. You're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, because you can't.
If they haven't got that.
You can't always ask them, can you please keep your hair and everything exactly as.
Especially if you're relying on that goodwill.
And this is, we should say, this is all dependent on the scale of your short film, because a lot of the time if you're starting out especially, you probably won't have crowds of people necessarily, unless you're very lucky to have those people who can do that.
I've seen short films made by people who, because they've got so many people in them, you keep getting people regurgitated in it, and you say, hang on a minute, that person died a minute ago, and now they're back in the movie again.
Especially when
and it's too obvious, if you see what I mean.
If it's their idea of less is more, or more for more's sake. Does that kind of translate?
Just because you can do more.
Just because we've got more to kind of supplement the lesser parts.
I think you've got to focus on the content of what you're trying to get over, the actual story itself, because
that's really important.
Because again, with that micro budget, you may need to say invest a certain amount in props, depending on what the genre of your movie is or what it is you're doing. You might think it's a great idea to spend all your budget on props, and neglect the quality
Of your script.
of the script, just
I would-
because you
I-
think great props is gonna hold it. You know what I mean?
I would also argue do the bits that you can do well,
Yes.
especially when you're starting out. Because
Work to your strengths.
yes, especially when starting out, because those are the things. If you're skilled at doing, like if you're good at composing music, then perhaps make your short film around music, edit it around the music. If you're a good sort of director in terms of directing actors, definitely make something that's got more dialogue, more sort of moments of acting.
But equally, it's being able to know when to step back. For example, if you've got somebody who is a good camera operator, knows what they're doing, utilise them, opposed to saying,
Don't
well,
set them to the sidelines.
I'm going to do this all myself. And if you've got somebody who's happy to help you, then delegate that job over to them.
Use people's skills.
Use people's skills
to your potential. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say use as in. I mean, I don't want it to sound like you're using people.
Or if you're working on a project, then
together,
it's probably best.
everybody's happy to work on that project.
Then,
then
makes your job easier as well if
makes
you're
your
going to
job.
delegate.
Because if you're going to try and be director, cameraman, set design, if you're going to put
props master.
you're trying to get everything to continuity, making sure that somebody's collar is not sticking up and things like that. You need to delegate to other people and not be worried about that. I'll give people the opportunity to rise to their, show their strength in what they do. Because you'd be surprised, you can get a much better product at the end of the day. Much better if you look at who you've got in your team and what they can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than just saying, okay, well, I've got to keep control of everything for fear of letting it go.
Yeah. It can be difficult when you're starting out, especially if you've got an idea and you're very passionate about the idea. 9 times out of 10, I would say when you actually watch your final film back, it probably is very different to your original vision, unless you've really stuck to it. Because things can crop up and change through the whole process. It can start out as something completely different to what it ends up as when you release it. So I'd say, yes, I agree. But also, if you're happy to be a bit bossier and say, this is what I want to do, then yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but do be open to criticism. If you're showing like a rough cut to a person who's never seen it before,
only way you're going to learn, yeah.
allow them to suggest things, make comments on it. Because if they don't necessarily understand the character's journey or something, and you think that was presented, then you kind of got to say, okay, this is somebody who hasn't seen this before, and I know in depth what's happening here. You kind of got to think about your audience to make them understand what you're thinking.
I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's other basic things on set. For example, two people having a conversation, and I've seen this happen before when I've been filming, where somebody is, the 180 rule. Do you want to tell the listeners what the 180 rule is? It's basically you don't break.
So in terms of a dialogue scene, you want the camera to stay at 180. Or on 180 degrees of the side.
One side.
On one side of the table. You've got two characters at the table. The camera stays on one side of the table, focuses on one character. They're focusing on the other character. You might do it wide, but but you don't suddenly jump to the opposite side of the table and back again.
It can be used sometimes if it's not necessarily a hard rule, but it's.
It depends on the scene.
But people
what you're
jump
shooting.
around, and then I've had people where one person in the conversation is suddenly in front of a window, and the light is just blasting them out. They're getting completely oversaturated because of the light and things, and you sort of stand there going, you really want to just move people over a little bit.
Yeah.
So do listen to those people around you, because it can end up being a better finish to what you're trying to produce if people have got that initial knowledge. Don't be scared that they're stepping on your toes.
Yeah.
They're offering you suggestions,
and it can be
how
difficult.
you can improve something.
It can be difficult as well if you are taking on everything. You can miss those details, and you can rush things. And...
Oh, good. Do not rush.
Yeah.
Don't.
The reason we're doing this podcast is because we shot one of my short films yesterday, and at the end of this episode, I would like to talk about that and just talk about some of the things we got wrong, some of the things we did right, just to put this whole podcast into context a little bit and apply it to something that's actually.
But again, I'd say don't rush. Don't go in there and say, right, today we must get loads of stuff done.
Yeah, we don't have to film this entire film in one day.
Make sure that you can have it in a chunk that you can. It gives you some time a buffer that if you need to retake scenes, that you've got some time allowance to do that. Don't just go in there and then you're running out of time, or because you're using that.
Because if you're rushing, that quality of what you're producing is going to go down.
And you're going to be thinking,
that's the sacrifice.
You're going to look at it and say, "Damn it, we've only done 2 scenes, and I've got 8 scenes I wanted to do today."
This is where the balance comes in, because I agree, but also if you are fighting against time and you don't have someone for a week and you can't plan out those shots for 5 days straight and go, we're going to do this scene today, we'll do this scene on Thursday. If you do have a strict time budget, then in some cases you do have to take liberties, and I think that's when the balance comes in. I think you
don't want to sacrifice quality.
But we've spoken about continuity, and you were saying that you don't always have this block, and now we're saying that we don't want to rush it. So that's what I mean. Finding the budget, finding the balance of time is also especially when you're starting out, because you are a one-man team to a certain extent right at the beginning, until you crew up and find people that are willing to help you. A lot of time you do have to just not rush it, but you can.
Yeah, but maybe
it's difficult because
it's difficult. But it's like, for example, if you've got a script and you've got 2 actors having a dialogue scene. For me, as a director, I want my talent to have read the script, understand the motivation of that conversation, to have practiced and remembered their lines, and then when I come to film that scene, they deliver those lines, and we might tinker it about a bit, change it, but you're not ad-libbing that scene. You're not going in and say, right, okay, well, what I'd like is, can you say something like this?
Yeah.
Can you say something like that?
Because you're never going to get the same thing twice.
The actors don't know what they're going to say. They don't know how they're going to deliver it. And then we say, well, can you say that again? And they go, well, what did I just say?
Yeah, because if a scene is presented on the same, on the day,
when I say don't
it's
rush
going to be weird.
Don't just go in there and say, well, look, you do this and you do that, and oh yeah, that's great and that's fine. Make sure that you've planned it out
and follow that plan.
Take your time to plan it out and stick to that, so that you get the best of what you're going to get at that moment.
And that's if you have the time.
Of course.
Of course. Of course.
It's, again, as you said, it's about that balance.
Yeah, you have to. I agree with what you say, Jack. You've got your financial budget.
It is a lot to take on.
And you have your time
It is a lot
budget.
to take on. You're not going to get it right straight away.
I'm speaking in this podcast. I'm speaking to that person that's sitting there thinking, I want to make a short film. What do I do? Is this going to be a difficult process? Yes, it is. I'm just trying to sort of break it down to say, do what you think is okay. And if you want to rush something, you can, but also make sure you learn from it if that's something that's...
I mean, have we mentioned what is considered to be a short film length?
My general rule was anything below 45 minutes was a short, anything above was a feature length, but I think it's kind of dependable, so it can sort of be 40 minutes.
Yeah, I think 40-45 minutes, that includes credits, is usually what the standard requirement for a short film.
Yeah, especially at film festival.
I would say as well, if you are starting out, probably don't, unless you have like a cracking script, I wouldn't say aim for 45 minutes. I would say keep it short and snappy.
Sweet, yeah.
All killer, no filler. So we've covered pre-production. I think we've probably covered production. A lot of, we've probably missed so much stuff because production is a beast in itself.
I mean, we could talk about this for hours.
It's a many-layered onion.
Yeah, and it's all dependent, because the thing I love about film is you have a camera and you can, within reason, do anything you want with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just opens up so many possibilities. So much can go right, and then alternatively, so much can go wrong.
Let's momentarily talk about camera. If you're going to film something, I'd say whatever camera equipment you've got, from the moment you start filming, you stick with that equipment.
Yeah, don't change.
Don't change halfway through.
Yes.
Or use 2 different or 3 different cameras.
I mean, a lot of the time you probably will, if you're starting out, you probably will have one camera.
Yeah, you'd have one camera. But again, I've been on sets where people have kindly donated their time and camera usage, but then you go and look at the end of the day, you look at the footage, and suddenly you're seeing
there's a quality change.
glaring difference between the footage.
And that could be quite jarring from the audience's perspective.
It suddenly changes from a really good quality,
very crispy
to
unfocused, really overexposed.
You know.
I agree.
So whatever equipment you've got,
stick to it.
I agree. If you have the equipment, use it. But make sure you're keeping it consistent, because if you're using 2 cameras in one scene, and as you say, if one of them's cheaper or
by all means use as many cameras as you like, as long as the footage, the quality is going to look.
If the
you're not
quality's
going to see a
same,
jump in the film quality.
Yeah, and a lot of the time that probably be, you could probably get away with that in terms of like if you used a lower quality camera for one scene, and then towards the end of the film, if you cut to a slightly higher quality camera, you kind of get away with that. But I would say,
but if it's in the same scene, you're suddenly jumping
scene,
from different angles to different qualities.
If we talk about this 180 rule again, if you've got a character talking to another camera, don't use a low quality camera for one speaker and
that's
another
pretty
one.
much that sums up what I was trying to get at on that one. But also, when you're talking the camera, we've got to talk audio, and audio that's the cheapest thing going, audio, but it is your best friend. The best audio.
Appreciate it.
If you try and get the best audio you can, because that pays dividends. There's nothing worse than having poor quality audio.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so,
that can definitely detract from the scene.
We can make the scene.
Yeah, it's why it's so important. Do not neglect the audio.
I would say I'm quite lucky that I know various people that are quite musically talented who can mix audio for films. But I would say if you're starting out, maybe look on YouTube for like royalty-free music if you can, because I'd say music is one of the hardest things to get right in film.
Well, for those that are,
because it is a whole new beast.
For those that are listening to this and think, okay, we've got into suddenly jump to post-production, and we need to put a score on this, and we need to use both incidental like Foley sounds or mood music as whatever we're doing through it. There are, again, you mentioned about royalty-free. There are sites that you can go onto, and for a very small fee, monthly fee, it's not like you're locked into it for a year or anything, but you can access huge libraries of copyright-free music, and
you've just got to then find it.
So then you got to dig through and see what it is you're looking for that suits what you filmed. But yeah, if you're worried, if you are thinking about how can I deal with the score, that is achievable at not a huge cost. If you haven't got anybody that can give their talents to doing a whole fresh new score for you. And
in the ideal world.
In the ideal world, but even then, if you're asking somebody to do the score, even for a short movie, that's a lot of work you're asking them to do.
Yeah,
so.
And probably not for a lot of money either, because
exactly,
and
then
of course, a micro budget.
If you're going to say, well, Dave, I really like that, but it's not quite capturing what I like. Can you go back and do it again?
I think you'll find Dave spent says no.
2 weekends doing that particular track and things.
Because then we're going back again to the production side of things and utilising people's skills and trusting that they probably know music better than you do, or in some cases.
Yeah. So I agree. If they can knock it out because it's second nature to them, then that's fine. But I would have thought they'd bounce it.
Appreciate them. That's the best thing you can do.
Appreciate your team.
Crew. Yeah.
Call it crew because that'd be more appropriate.
So, okay, we're firmly into post-production now. Editing, I love editing footage and tinkering with footage and colour correcting and things. You don't necessarily need to go into that in depth if you're just starting out, because colour correction and editing can be quite a daunting process. But I would say keep your edit in mind when you're filming, because you'll find that when you begin post-production, you want to have all the footage that you've planned in place, because there's nothing worse than starting your edit and realising that you've missed certain shots, or you need other shots and you can't go back and get them, or you haven't turned the microphone on, or whatever. You need to make sure that you're thinking about your edit.
Yeah, well, that's why filming. In my mind, when I'm filming, I always want to get more footage than I think I'm going to need.
Yeah, get more than you think, and then more.
Exactly. And if somebody says, "Oh, have you thought about maybe doing this?" You think, "Okay, I hadn't thought about doing it." But if you've got the opportunity, you've got your time budget allows, then film something else, because you never know. You might go back and look at it and go,
yes, that was amazing.
That was a really good suggestion.
Thank you very much.
So, talking about post-production, are there any particular software packages you would recommend for making a micro movie? Because the reason I mention this is because I know, Zach, you're very afraid with using Avid.
Avid Media Composer, but
is industry standard.
The thing about that is, it's expensive. It's a beast.
Yeah. It's a beast, and the learning curve is a difficult one.
Yeah.
Whereas you do...
I'm more prone to Premiere Pro just because the layout's a bit simpler.
But that also has a monthly fee on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do pay for it.
Do you have to buy that as a package upright and then do it as a monthly fee, or these days is it just literally you subscribe and then download the software on a subscription? Do you have to fork out I don't know, £500 first for the package and then go on a monthly
No,
subscription.
not at all. It's
Okay.
the Adobe Creative Cloud, so it's like Photoshop, Premiere Pro, After Effects, all of
So
these things.
what kind of cost would that be for somebody who's just listening to us and thinking, well, how much is this going to cost me?
Premiere Pro, you're probably looking at about £15 a month, which isn't too bad because I use it a lot, so it's something that I'm not.
Yeah, especially if you're going to utilise
What's
it.
the learning curve on that? Is it easy for somebody maybe who's not really that used to using?
A lot of my editing is sort of self-taught. We did my first kind of experience with Premiere Pro was at college, so we did sort of do little projects and experiment with Premiere Pro. And I think I would say start with, if you can, find a free software.
Yeah.
Something like iMovie.
Well, iMovie would be what I was going to say is one of the basic.
Even that you can get on your phone and things. The classic is obviously Movie Maker. I'm not even sure if that's still around anymore.
I mean, there are other ones. I think Sony do packages.
Oh, Sony Vegas. Do you
Sony
remember that?
Yeah,
Sony Vegas, there's,
yeah, for a period of time we used Sony Vegas. That was actually really intuitive, not too difficult to get your head behind. But then as you progress with these types of software, you suddenly hit a block where you realise it can't go.
Yeah. You've got other software like DaVinci, which is pretty.
Yeah, I've heard of DaVinci.
So there's.
Oh, and going back to Avid, they do a cut down version, don't they? A free version.
Oh, yeah, there is a. Yeah, I can't remember the name.
But there's Avid, and so you can look that's a free version.
Yeah, but you're only limited on, I think it's certain types of export formats.
So look into that. But yeah.
And the amount of projects you can have at any one time.
I would say if you're basically starting out, I'd say start with something free. There's so many.
Yeah. If you've had no experience at all, then go free.
There's so many different softwares out there you can get for free nowadays. There's not as there's more now than when I started out. I've realised that you can just Google editing software. There's probably things like in browser as well, like on the internet that you can use. You don't even need to download anything.
I know this is going to sound a bit odd, but I have spoken to people before that think that if you spend $500,000 on software,
if you don't know how to use
you
it,
put your film footage in it, that somehow it magically turns it into a movie.
Not at all.
No. So don't, if you listen to this, there is a learning curve, and you can't escape it.
Yeah.
It's only really if you're like me. I enjoy color correcting and different forms of editing and editing different bits of footage. That's the only reason I'd say to invest in anything that you need to pay for. But it's the same with any equipment. If you treat your software like it's equipment, if you have expensive equipment and you don't know how to use it, then it's essentially useless. You might as well just use your camera phone.
So there is another aspect to the editing software as well, because you've obviously got your, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, if you want to add anything to this, but you've got your film editing software. So this is where you take your footage and you cut your scenes together, etc., etc. But if part of your movie story or movie process is that you need to put some special effects in there, some VFX, your movie software doesn't always. That's a different thing altogether. Sometimes you need to use a different program for doing VFX.
But then I would say,
so
if you've got to the point where you're editing and you need a big VFX shot, by that point you don't need it. Like if you've planned to have a big laser fight and you can't do lasers, don't put the laser fight in the film, because you're never going to be able to make a laser fight. Unless you're very lucky and you know someone that can do it.
Exactly. But this is what I'm trying to say is, for the person that doesn't appreciate what's involved in this post-production, and they just think, okay, I'm going to get some movie software and I'm going to be able to do all the things that are in my head. That's not always the case. If you're going to do blue or green screen, not all software will, especially the freebies, will deal with things like that.
Yeah.
If you're just putting a kind of an effect in, even if you're doing like a gun flare and things, you don't just assume that when you're getting some software that is something that comes with it.
So when it comes to choosing an editing software, obviously we said earlier that all this technical stuff can be quite jarring to new people. Would you say that by choosing an editing software, the way about going to do that would be to go by recommendation or reviews, ratings?
What do you reckon? I think the important thing is understanding what level you're at with editing.
Yeah, it's got to be
if you're lucky enough to have
interface. If I go down and download, obviously we spoke about Avid, even the free version, there's still a steep learning curve.
Yeah, Avid Media Composer.
Generally, the layouts will always be similar, because that's just how people design editing software now, because everything's got to be kind of similar, that you can jump in and almost start. It's all
kind of semi-standard.
It's all template like Movie Maker, like from when you're a kid. It's like it starts it's the same thing, just more bits stuck on the side of it. So I think when it comes to choosing one, understand what level you're at in terms of editing, what you need to edit. If you're doing, as we say, like a big laser fight, maybe look at something, search it up, see if it can do green screen, if it can do like inbuilt visual effects, then go for it. But if you're just doing a very basic drama where it's just mostly dialogue between two characters, you don't need all that stuff bolted on the side. So you can use something like iMovie where all you need to do is cut between a few takes. So I'd say understand what level you're at in terms of editing, and then go from there. What you need it for is a big one.
But if you're going to pass the editing job off to somebody else, or more than one person even, but if you just stick with one person, you've still got to find that that person has got to walk the walk with you, that you are going to...
You've got to be on the same page.
Communicate with that person all the time. That person is putting hours of their time into... Especially if you don't know how to edit.
Yeah.
And
you can't wave a magic wand and make something suddenly happen.
And somebody says, oh, that was really good what you've just done, but can you do this or can you do that? And they've gone, oh man, I've spent an hour, my whole free weekend doing this. So you've got to be able to make sure that whoever's editing it, if it's not you, that they are really 100% on board, happy to do that, and are going to work.
Understand the commitment and time that they've put in.
Because sometimes people will edit something, completely finish this short little film, and we've had this from experience, and then, can you add this in, or can you add that?
Yeah, and it's not as simple as.
And it's not as simple as that. Once you've got all the layers there, where you've got all the music over the top, and you can't just suddenly jump something.
It's like baking a cake and then
saying, "Oh, you missed out the currants."
Yeah,
can you stick some?
I missed the eggs.
You've got the whole cake baked and decorated, and then they say, "Oh, this could do with more sugar." It's almost like
you can't do that.
You can put it on top, but other than that, it's like it's not going to look as you think it will.
So in that post-production process, if you aren't doing it yourself and you are engaging somebody else to do it, please be sympathetic to the hours that they put in,
or make your vision very clear to them. And if you let them off and say, do what you think looks good,
and then
chances are it won't look how you think it will,
and it doesn't come back the way you want it. Then you go,
then everyone's unhappy.
Everyone's happy.
And if you're lucky, if you live somewhere close to your editor, if you're sending it off to someone else, maybe arrange to sit in with them if they're editing, so you can sort of direct them.
Look over their shoulder.
I would recommend that if you can. Or alternatively, if you're really set on a vision, edit it yourself if you can. As we've mentioned, you can get plenty of software out there that can do the basic.
I kind of think it's almost like if you're an author. If you've got a book in your head and you say, I want to write this book, I want to put this story I've got in my mind down on paper, ultimately you're the one who needs to push those buttons and type it out.
Yeah.
Unless you've got such a huge budget, if somebody's being paid, it doesn't matter. That's what we're talking about. That's the difference. If you're paying a team and they're being paid for it, and you've got a budget to pay, you can say, I don't like what has come out. You've misunderstood my meaning. Can you go and redo it? And they'll go, okay, fine, that's fine, because you're paying me for it.
And that's their job. Yeah,
that's my job. I'll do it. I don't care. You can have it whichever way you want.
But if you're relying on that,
but if you're doing it and you're not paying anybody, and it's all done by goodwill, that's when, perhaps, if you want to get that vision that you've got in your head, maybe you need to be that author, get on that software and produce the final product yourself. Yeah.
So I think we've kind of glazed over a lot of the, obviously there's so much that can depend on how your success of your short film.
Yes.
Ultimately, I would say have fun. As long as you're having fun making your film and it's something that you want to do.
You're enjoying the creative process.
Yeah, as long as you're having fun, it's not too stressful, because obviously if you're not getting anything out of it, then you don't want it to take over your life.
And if you're taking anybody along for the ride with you, friends or whoever that are helping you out, make sure they're having fun as well.
Yes.
Look after them and make sure that at the end of the day, everybody leaves with a smile on their face.
And I think
we had fun.
That will carry over as well to when you finish the film, and you can look back and say, I had a really good time making that, or I had a good laugh making that, and that was really good fun. Ultimately, on the other hand, if you've had a really stressful experience and if everyone doesn't like your vision, or you've treated everyone really poorly on set,
again, you don't want to have people getting there, Joe, I'm really hungry, or I really need a drink. I haven't had anything.
That's when people complain.
Because they'll look back on that film and say, can't stand looking at this film because it just takes me back to that time where I was feeling really hungry and thirsty. And
yes, you're suddenly employing the mindfulness and going, oh, I'm now re-experiencing bad emotions and anxiety from the past. You know, so yeah, make the whole process fun.
Have fun and know your limits, and as we said, play to your strengths.
Yeah, and I would suggest anybody listen to this, because this is probably the first podcast on making a micro-budget film. So if you've got any questions that you want to ask us,
we can answer it in a future
episode. Then that feeds us, and we can.
Yeah, I'd like to finish talking about the film we did yesterday, because that's ultimately why we kind of came up with the idea to do this podcast today. It wasn't a perfect shoot for me. I think some of the things we've addressed in this episode, I probably got wrong. I probably rushed a little bit too much towards the end.
Right.
So I would again recommend making sure you've got everything planned out before you start actually rolling.
Well, you didn't show it, Jack.
But this is difficult because we've got quite a lot of experience with it, so we're attuned to it, and we're kind of used to the waiting around between takes and things.
Well, if there was anything about yesterday's shoot that was a factor for me, it was the fact that you were bound on a very limited time.
Yes,
and that wasn't so. That was partly the time, the amount of hours you had to do what you wanted to do, but also because of the time of the year.
Yeah,
you were losing light.
Yeah,
towards the end of it, so that was a very physical limitation.
Yeah, I was very ambitious. I did aim to just get the whole thing done in a day, which probably we've addressed is not a good thing to do.
I mean, in that we are going to probably go back and shoot some more stuff.
Yeah, we'll arrange time to.
And I've promised I will not cut my beard.
But we're all generally quite experienced with it, so when I say to you guys we're going to try and do this thing in a day, we kind of know in the back of our minds we're probably not going to get the whole thing done, but at least we know we're probably going to get the majority of it, and we're used to the process of filmmaking.
Yeah, so we can plan effectively.
Yes, I would say if you're with like a brand new group of people, or you've got actors in, even if you're lucky enough to be paying actors to come in, I definitely wouldn't say let's do it all in one day, because if they're getting paid for it and they're waiting around all day, it's probably not.
Yeah, they're probably going to appreciate
very well on you.
More than one day's work.
Yeah,
especially from the actor's perspective.
So I think it's something I'll learn from, and we'll be able to plan out more in future. But I think that was one of the negatives I took from yesterday, was just because I just tried to do too much in one.
Yeah, you didn't really notice.
No, you kept a cool head.
You kept it very cool, you know.
Yeah, because it was just the three of us, and we did have to basically do everything.
Yeah. But I knew, as I've said already, we were on a bit of a time constraint there, both time and light, because of the time of the year.
And also, I think you'll find the person listening who is wanting to make a short film, you'll probably find that you're planning a lot of this in your free time, after work, before work, in your breaks or whatever. So it can be difficult to meticulously plan a short film when you're limited to a few hours a day. So yeah, I'd say if you have the time to plan in great detail, obviously it's probably going to reflect positively when you actually film, because everyone will know exactly what they're doing. In this case, I planned enough to get what we could on the day.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had 5 days a week to meticulously plan it, spend 6 hours a day doing it, then the day would have run a lot smoother.
I suppose you've got to put into consideration what the end result you actually want from it. Do you want to, say, submit this to a festival, so you want this to look the best thing?
What is your aim?
Yeah.
Is it self-pleasure, as in you just want to watch it for your own benefit? Is it because it's maybe something for family and friends?
Is it for a specific audience?
Yeah.
I think my goal with filming, as long as I'm happy with it, is something, if I've got something in my mind that I want to
translate
to film. I'm going to ask you the question then, Jack. With the movie you're doing at the moment that we were filming on yesterday, is that going in Jack's archive? I mean, is that something to please you ultimately, that you've had this idea, you've managed to then create the idea, create the film, you sit there and watch it and go, yeah, okay, I'm happy with what I've produced, but is it for a personal?
Well,
what's your end goal?
This is slightly different because it leans into more practice. I'm a bit rusty when it comes to directing, and I've recently got some new equipment, so a lot of what we did yesterday was basically just
a bit of a learning,
a bit of experimenting, kind of shaking off the rust and like getting back into the groove of how my camera works, how I work as a director. So it's a bit different. If I was to make something like
He did let me have a coffee.
I did make it part of the film.
He let me sit in the woods by myself for half an hour, having a coffee. So there
But
you go.
I would say if it's a proper project, I would say you do need to have something like a plan at the end if you're going to put it into a festival.
Yeah.
If you're going to upload it onto YouTube for whatever reason, if you're going to release it physically.
I mean, it might be somebody, he wants to release it physically in order to sell it.
Yeah.
If you want to make money off of it, if you're making...
There's lots of, horror, these what was it? Horror by the Sea or whatever. What was that one over at...
Yeah, it's Horror by the Sea, yeah.
Yeah, and there's lots
It's
of...
a festival.
That's a festival. There's a lot, and you got the filmmakers, and they sell their films at the
Now,
festivals.
the thing with film festivals is they do sometimes come with strict parameters to allow you to submit it to this festival. Sometimes it's you've got to submit this film unreleased, so it hasn't been widely distributed for like a year, 2 years prior. So this is planning way in advance. And other things, it can be how long it is, what it's about, who it's aimed at. All these different factors you have got to take into consideration when submitting to a festival.
Yeah, I agree. And if your film unfortunately doesn't fit into those categories, I wouldn't alter your film just to get it into a festival.
Yeah.
Necessarily, I would stick with your vision and what you
Unless
think.
it is the fact that you are aiming specifically to submit it to a festival.
If you need to trim a couple of minutes off to get it into a festival and it doesn't change the narrative or anything, I would say do it. But
yeah,
do it.
If you're setting
in your
out-
mind, do it as the theatrical cut, and then have your director's cut.
yeah, if you've seen a festival and you go, wow, they want a 30-minute short film. If you're doing that as a project and it's specifically for that festival,
then great.
But if you've genuinely got an idea that you want to make and that you're enthusiastic about,
Don't limit yourself to that.
yeah, I wouldn't
Sacrifice.
try and mold it to the festival.
Yeah, don't sacrifice your vision.
Yeah,
to try and conform to that.
find the festivals that will take it, but don't make it
Because
for
they're
the
all
festival.
over the place. They're like globally accessible.
And again, going back to what we said at the start with the internet, you can just submit these things and send them off to different countries to get viewed and all sorts now. So
I'm going to ask you guys, and I've pre-planned this, but I just thought, have we each got a tip? What would be your tip? Can we say really simple, really basic? But what would you give our budding filmmakers?
Appreciate your crew.
Okay, that's your tip. That's a good one. It's nice to be appreciated.
Yeah, appreciate everyone and everything, especially low budget films or micro budget films. Appreciate what you have, what you're doing, and everyone around you.
Yeah, the time they've given up.
Yeah.
help you out.
Definitely.
my tip would be know your limits. Know exactly what your limits are. If it's a physical thing, like if you don't have the equipment, maybe don't try and do elaborate shots or anything, because chances are you won't have the equipment to do it. If you don't have someone that can do music for you, just know what you're capable of. And if you're very good at cinematography or if you're very good at editing, do those things very well, and then the rest will hopefully fall into place. And through that process, you will be learning those things as well. So ultimately, just be open to learning new skills and just know what you're capable of and do it well, I would say.
My tip for a novice filmmaker: watch your shadows.
Oh,
There's nothing
wow,
worse
okay.
than seeing a mic that's on a boom that's suddenly making a shadow somewhere, and you don't notice it.
I can completely
on
take
the
you out of the
camera.
I
story.
mean, I noticed one earlier with the footage we got yesterday.
Oh, really?
And,
Yeah.
And that can just kill something. So
Yeah.
if there's a shadow in the wrong place, or you've got somebody, it's very difficult sometimes because you've got that little. Unless you've got a separate, say, Ninja Blade monitor or something like that that's got a slightly bigger screen, is easy to miss. So shadows, somebody could be standing to the side and you don't even realise that individual is casting a shadow into the scene and it's moving around. So watch the shadows, guys. That's my tip.
That is a very good tip.
Unless the shadows are intentional.
Yeah, unless they're intentional, or if there's an unintentional one with clawy hands that suddenly appears in the background, you go, what's that doing there?
Well, I noticed one earlier with quite a key shot that we did. I know it was my shadow, which was annoying. But again, going back to what we were saying, that was towards the end of the day where I feel like I was just trying to get as much done as I could.
Yeah.
Whereas if we did those shots at the start of the day, or we sort of budgeted, or if I budgeted my time a bit better,
Well,
we could. perhaps have got those shots done earlier and been a bit more alert to those sort of things.
But again, time of the year, because we've got short. I mean, those days are getting longer, but the sun was going down towards the end of that shot.
Yeah.
I know you'd already been to the location and already had your ideas of the different areas in the location you want to do different scenes at. But then when you went to one of them, you went, the sun is right in the wrong place for what I wanted to do. It still looked great when you showed me some footage, if that's the one we're talking about. But yeah, so that's the other thing. You know, you go in there and you can have a cloudy day and you can say, oh, this is really good. You know, this is going to look great. And then you turn up to do the shoot and it's bright sunlight and suddenly
well, maybe that's one of the
everywhere.
most important things. It's the fact that you've got that plan. The plan can change when you get to filming it, but the fact that you have that plan to start off with is key to make everything run as smoothly as it can.
Yes. And if everybody knows that plan.
Yeah. Communication.
Yeah, communication is important to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page as best you can. It's difficult when you've got something in your mind and you can't quite articulate it on paper or, like we were saying, in pre-production. It can be quite difficult to get the actors or the cinematographers to tune into that vision and say, this is what I want.
But that might be a good reason to have a pre-shoot meeting.
Yeah, previous,
and to sort of get people to, don't leave it to the day and then say, right, guys, today we're doing this. Yeah. Everybody that turns up should already have
you're 5 pages ahead of everyone else.
You know,
and they've got to catch up to you.
You know, I've seen people where people have posted and said, what are we actually filming?
Yeah, well,
I
think
what are we filming? And it's better to let you know what you're going into doing.
I think with our shoot yesterday, I probably did the minimum I could have done to keep you guys.
Well,
I gave you the shot list.
We'd already read through the shot list.
But I was still, on the day, we still took a bit of time for me to...
Oh, you're being hard on yourself.
But no, this is learning. This is what we're doing.
But but I know you got some new camera equipment. And so... Yeah, I'm no fool. I know that you're there going, right, I've got to make sure that this is working, that it is doing what I'm asking it to do.
That's focus. This is in shot.
Yeah.
So you in your head, you're having to not only get the scene that you want, but you're also dealing with all the tech side of it, which on that particular equipment is relatively new to you.
Yeah. So I will.
You might have used it back in your studio, but that was I assume that was its first
time I've used it.
Yeah, exactly.
Properly,
First outing.
It's all right for me and Zach to be standing around and just taking instructions, but you had that in your head as well. We didn't have to think about that.
No.
So.
Yeah. It's again just finding that balance and just doing as much as you can to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Oh, I've got one final tip I just thought of. Make sure you don't forget to put a memory card in things.
Oh God, or clear your memory card.
You need an equipment checklist. Equipment checklist.
Been there where someone spent all morning doing filming and to find that the card was corrupted.
We had a minor one a couple of weeks ago where we went to do a location scout and I wanted to get some test footage. Just in my haste and I was rushing in the morning, completely forgot the tripod shoe.
Yeah.
Easily done. I've done that myself.
And a lot of the shots I wanted to do were stationary on a tripod, but then I was stuck with a shoulder mount. So a lot of my test footage wasn't quite how I wanted it to be. So again, Zach, like as you said, equipment list is a good one to put in there.
Yeah, we'll come up with other tips as we come back to the subject again.
But again, it's like when you're first starting, you'll get all of this stuff wrong first.
That's not a bad thing.
Not a bad
you
thing
can learn
all.
from it.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a vital part of it is to say, okay, I got it wrong. Now I know that I got it wrong. I can get it right, and I can gradually improve.
And I think
it's no bad thing to get things wrong, because if you can go out there and everything's perfect from day one, you're not necessarily going to learn from that. If you see what I mean.
And I think the best thing to do, if you've built up a catalogue of short films, look back on your old short films and look at the things you got wrong, because you'll look back and at the time you'll be like, this is a masterpiece. This is like the greatest film ever. You'll look back and think this is a load of rubbish, because you've learned so much from that point. 3 or 4 films down the line, you'll be looking back and thinking, I got that.
Yeah, well, I do that with writing. I write. I love short stories. I've done for years, and over the years I've written lots of short stories, and then I go back and I read them, and I'm continuing going, I don't like that. I want to change that. You got to get to that point. You go, well, actually, no, leave that alone.
Well, that was a thing that they said at university. A project is never fully completed, it's only abandoned. So it was the idea that you could never truly be 100% happy with something. You can just choose not to keep tweaking it. Because if you keep
Leave
tweaking
as it is, yeah.
for months and months and months and months and months, is it ever really going to get released?
Well, that's something interesting I learned, bringing it back to Stanley Kubrick again. Get your bingo cards out.
Go on, Stanley Kubrick.
That I heard something in a documentary about Stanley Kubrick that when he was doing Eyes Wide Shut, which was in the 90s, he was still editing The Shining. He still had a cut of The Shining that he was editing and playing with, even 10, 15 years after it had come out.
But you hear that of a lot of directors. A lot of directors look back, and that's why we get director's cuts of movies where they managed to get that extra footage that had to be cut from the theatrical because of time constraints, etc., or the studio saying, no, we want to make it a bit more commercial, so we're going to cut that out. And nowadays, because of the facility of having the ability to release directors of cuts, that's what we get. And you'll always get people that look back at, that's what I could do at the time because of the budget constraints. That's all I could do. But if I was doing that now, I'd do that different. I mean, it's going to happen.
The big one is...
It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're doing a blockbuster movie or you're doing a micro-budget movie.
Yeah, the big one is George Lucas going back on his... at the time, we would probably argue better cuts of Star Wars. And at the time, he couldn't do, obviously, the CGI creatures and things. So 20 years later, he goes back and adds the CGI creatures in. So, as you say...
And yet they look so out of place.
Yeah, they do. But
especially in the original trilogy, yeah.
That's what he set out to do, and he's felt the need to go back to one of his old projects that everyone else thinks is perfect. And he's still not happy with it.
Well, again, it's like special effects, for the sake of special effects, isn't always the best road to go down. John Milius, who produced Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan the Barbarian, at that time there were an awful lot of sword and sandal type fantasy movies out, and they had people running around in rubber orc masks, and they were putting really poor, limited obviously at that time, VFX in it. And he said, John Milius said, I am not going to put these people in orc masks because they look crap, and I'm going to minimise all the VFX because they're not going to do what I really would like them to do because the technology isn't there.
Are they going to complement the film? If the answer is no, why is it there?
So we literally, if you ever watch Conan the Barbarian with Schwarzenegger in it, very limited on VFX and a bit of animatronics in there, but that's it.
Well, I think that's
because he wanted to make it as realistic as possible with the limitations that they had at the time.
I think that's going back to my tip of know your limits.
Know your limits.
If you're setting out, if you've got a brilliant script or which has got intergalactic battles and spaceships and things, if you can't build those spaceships, then...
Well, again, I saw a micro budget movie which intrigued me. I bought it. I'm not going to mention what it was, but I bought it, and that had big battle sequences in it.
I know the one you're talking about.
The director obviously couldn't afford to have hordes of people charging over the hillside to fight with each other, so he'd gone out and literally been in the public area of reenactment events, filming reenactors fighting, and then tried to put different filters.
We can only hope with consent.
Maybe not. But the thing was, that's how he got his battle sequences. And it was like, hang on a minute, we're in the War of the Roses, and now we're Vikings are fighting Anglo-Saxons, and it was like, yeah, I think
maybe it was an artistic choice.
Well, I think another example of what you're talking about is if there was a scene at a cliffside.
Yeah.
In that movie, there was scenes like with a cliffy-like background.
Yeah.
How hard is it really to go out
to location
and film?
Oh, are you talking that bit where it was green screen?
Yeah,
on
it was green screen cliffs, and it was like green screen for the sake of green screen. So you may as well just go out and get a really good shot of a cliffside.
Yeah.
And it's got your Lord of the Rings style bit.
Make it look really epic.
But yeah, I remember. But they decided to get two people standing in front of the
green
screen.
It's CG green screen for the sake of it.
And it doesn't look good. So yeah, know your limitations.
Know your limits.
And see what you can get the best out of from what you've got.
And the rest will come as well in terms... I've learned so much about editing and even sound, music, anything like that. When you're making a short film, you are forced to take on multiple roles, like we said early on in this episode. So you will pick up skills. You won't necessarily be good at all of them. No one can be perfect at every role in a film set. So I think something we're going to take away from this episode is utilize everyone's skills. Make sure you're appreciating people's skills, because a lot of the time it will be in their own time. They won't be getting paid for it. Know your limits, as we said.
Have a good plan.
Have fun.
And have fun. Have fun. Like with anything, if it's not fun,
you're not going to do it.
You're not
And I
gonna do
like what you said, Zach, about like take criticism. Don't take criticism badly. Take it as a positive.
Yeah, it's not an insult.
Yeah, because a lot of time people won't see your vision and they'll look at it and go, "What is he trying to tell here? Like this has completely missed the point." So I think utilize that criticism, and if you can improve on it, if you want to ignore it, you can. That's fine.
The end decision is up to you.
Never see it as a negative thing.
Yes. What a good finishing point, I think.
Yes. There's so much more we could talk
Yeah,
about.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to come back and revisit.
We're
the
definitely.
subject. And as I say,
Yeah.
please, listeners, chuck some questions over. Pick our brains. More than happy to help out.
Yes.
So that brings us neatly to Word of the Week.
Ooh, word of the week.
Or fudge nugget or something.
The word of the
bowl.
week was the word of the week was fudgel, not
Fudgel.
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 No, it wasn't fudgel.
Yes.
It's
Come on,
fudgel.
theorise.
Fudgel. Well, okay. A cudgel is a stick. Fudgel. I'm thinking it's got to be I don't know. Maybe it's a stick that you clean your drains with.
A fudgel.
I don't know. Fudgel.
A fudgel is a food, I
Okay.
think,
A food.
Go for food, okay.
that's fudge based.
Fudge-based food.
Fudgel. It's a type of Willy Wonka bar called a
A
fudgel.
fudgel bar.
Fudgel bar.
What is that off-brand
Tootsie.
Willy Wonka
I
bar?
like those Tootsie rolls. They're awful. Yeah, maybe not a stick that you clean your drains with. A fudgel. Maybe it's when you make a mistake.
You fudgel something up.
Yes, because you fudge up. Maybe a fudgel is when something that you intended has gone completely wrong.
So, fudgel is the act of giving the impression you are working when really you are doing nothing.
Right.
The last one we had was croaking, wasn't it? Which is when you
No,
look at someone.
You've missed one. Croaking. No, we
Oh,
had.
no, we did,
What did we have?
It
What was the
was
last one?
expurge factor.
Expurge factor.
I never actually heard the.
Oh,
end
you
of that
didn't
one.
find out what
No.
expurge factor was?
I guessed, but never heard it.
Oh,
Yeah, the fudgel is an action again, so it's something that's.
Fudgel.
you'll just have to go listen to that previous episode.
To fudgel.
So you're pretending to work.
I'm
but
pretending
you're
to work, but you're not really.
It's a bit like us doing a podcast, really. Isn't it?
Aw. Yeah, but at least we're having fun.
Yay,
Hey.
fun.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to this channel and comment below any suggestions of topics or activities you'd like to listen to in future episodes. You can find the Now We Know Show podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music and Apple Podcasts. Check out the Zak Wylde Productions social media pages on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, or visit the Zak Wylde Productions website at www.zakwyldeproductions.com. Please get in contact, we'd love to find out how you're listening to us. So get in touch in the comments and don't forget to check out Zak Wylde Productions on Patreon to become an official ZWP patron today. That's a big, creative goodbye from Zach.
A big mind your shadows goodbye from Buzz.
And it's a big action goodbye from Jack.
Now we know, now we know, now we know show. Now we know, now we know.
Now we know show.
It's a wrap.